Good afternoon from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's Sunday, the 25th of January 2026, and the time, Brisbane time, is currently 1 p.m. It's a scathing hot day, 34 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow they predict 36 or 37, I think it was 36 I looked at, which is hot. Very, very hot, but we've had much hotter, but summer's not over yet, is it? So welcome to Titania's Realm, where I live on planet Earth with the rest of you Earthlings and planet Hellscape. And it's indeed been a hellscape all morning. I've been fighting with the usual COVIDian brainwashed trolls on, can't remember, some esoteric group. I don't know why I bother staying in that group. The people in there are mostly mindlessly mass formation psychotic and really a waste of my time and energy. So I got irritated with that, and then I went out in the scathing heat. I got this mad dog's an Englishwoman, you understand, although I'm not English, I'm a New Zealander. But I've got enough English bloodlines in me on my father's line to make me a bit mad, I suppose. We won't just blame the English bloodlines either. Take your pick. But anyway, Scottish, Irish, English, German, Polish, smatterings of French, and a tiny smattering of Spanish too. My great, can't remember how far back, 5th great grandmother, I think, Cecilia Herbert, who hailed from Spain. And then I found a French ancestor also, all on my father's line. It's very interesting actually, my ancestry, when you dig into it, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, because I'm the last of that line as far as I can tell, since my children have borne no progeny, and it's very likely too late now. One is 38 and the other is 40, so anyway, I digressed. So I went out like a mad English woman, but from New Zealand, to repot my orchids that hang on the, it's not really a fence, it looks like a fence, but the thing that encloses underneath my house, the timber fencing or wall. And they've long ago needed repotting. They've been straggling and struggling for quite some time. So I bought the orchid potting mix some weeks ago, and then I bought a second packet, which I'm glad I did because there wasn't enough. So I did need 2 packets, or 1.5 packets. But I bought some more yesterday. Was it yesterday? A few days ago. Friday. And so I went out and I repotted my lovely Cymbidium orchids, which are splendid when they flower. They have the most beautiful blooms. And so it took me some time in the scathing heat, even though I sat in the shade at one point, cutting them, trying to reef them out of their old little pots where they'd overgrown and merged almost with the pot. So that took a lot longer than I anticipated, and it was a bit of a bloody struggle. And then I was dripping in my own perspiration. Then I came in to see some troglodyte trolls were continuing on the battle with me about COVID on that Facebook group. And I'm the Tanya. I never cede, I never quit, and I never yield, and I never walk away from a battle. So I found myself still, fighting with this entity. I doubt they're even human. That they're either stupid or they're not human. It's unbelievable what I'm dealing with. But anyway, I don't have to deal with it, do I? I could just do what I'm doing now, walking away from that whole bloody mess and leaving them to their own destruction, because they willfully complied with it and are still defending it. So it is their own cliff, and they are their own little lemming. or just watch them jump and wave. Bye-bye. Sorry you were so stupid and or corrupt and or compliantly and or willfully ignorant. It's no excuse for willful ignorance, by the way. I spent the entire COVIDian years, you know, reading all the scientific papers that the few rare and courageous scientists put up to actually find out what was really happening, and I happen to be on the right side of history, and I happen to be, you know, reasonably correct in my assumptions. Some of it were formed long before COVID even became a thing, you know, a direct consequence of my having survived child sexual abuse as a child, made me by nature anti-authoritarian and highly suspicious of any mass formationed directives peddled by a few and shilled by celebrities. When every man and their dog gets on, has an opinion about something, but they don't actually have any real knowledge, worry. The same was said, I think, by Paul Getty back in the 20s, who had his shoes shined. I think it was Paul Getty. I could be wrong, I could be misappropriating, but it was some famous American financier, very, very wealthy. Anyway, he had, this is a true story, by the way, people of Earth. It might not be, I might not have the right person, but this actually did happen. They had their shoes shined, and the lovely shoe shine boy gave him advice on the stock market. And he went straight from, you know, having his lovely shoes shine. They would have been very exquisite shoes because he was an exquisitely wealthy man. And he pulled the majority of his stocks out of the market that very day. I think it was very shortly after that the stock market crashed. And someone asked him, how did you know the market was about to crash? And he smiled very sanguinely and he said, when a shoe shine boy knows more about the stock market than I do, I know it's time to cash out. And that philosophy carries across to the current COVID paradigm, where everyone thought they were an expert. Even the experts thought they were experts for a price, and were complicit with it all, and, you know, compliant and went along and got along to get along for the sake of keeping their jobs and their careers, which I kind of understand. I can have compassion for that, because, you know, if I had a career that I did not want to risk, I might have felt coerced and willing to go along to get along too. But when it's your entire species continuing survival and safety and DNA involved, you have a responsibility to stand up and be counted and speak out. So I did. Little old me with nothing to lose, because I'd already had my wealth torn from me in 1995, and again in 2008, and again in 2012. I'd already had every mad dog and arsehole have a ride. When you've got nothing to lose except your very own life, you get a little bit intransigent about certain fashion plates. When a disease becomes a fashion plate, you should also sit up and take notice, people of Earth. Human beings are by nature herd animals, and they go along with whoever the most perceived to be powerful, noisy, dominating, controlling arsehole there is. They continuously vote them in too, because by nature they're weak and they like to be led by something or someone. When COVID came, I realised we weren't being led by something human anymore, because no human would even endorse that. With an ounce of common sense, they would just say, like I did, what's wrong with this picture and what are the final outcome of this going to actually be? Well, we're living it now, aren't we? We're living it. and it's a long way from being over. In fact, I don't think it will ever be over now. It's a fait accompli. So lest I go completely insane from the absolute ghastly horror of all of it, what I'm living through, people of Earth. I've lived through other ghastly horrors that were immense, but I think this is the one time in human history where it's been a ghastly horror that's affected every living mortal on Earth, including, by the way, our pets, and the shedding and the shedding. It affects them too. And you know, what can I say? What can I say? There's nothing more to be said. But it's hot and it's uncomfortable. I've got this $124 piece of shit flowing cool air on there. I've got the fan on the birdie boys. And if it gets worse, we'll go into the living room and we'll put on the air conditioner. But it's not too bad in here actually. It's cooler in the house. I've tried to keep the windows and doors sort of closed and some of the blinds closed just to deflect some of the scathing fucking heat. So I don't know how I'm going to get through tomorrow, but I say that every day. How am I going to get through each day? And somehow I do, with a little bit of whimsy and mischief at sometimes, and determination, and my very infamous characteristic defiance, people of Earth. So here we go. I thought we would continue on with, what is that? What is that on my desk? It's a big cut on my desk. How did that happen? I'll have to sand it back and re-varnish it or something. It's getting very beaten up. Well, it's a working jeweler's desk. I did actually, yesterday, it came over me like a muse. It's when I make things, the muse has to be with me. So I'll just quickly digress before we start chapter 4. Sorry, people of Earth. I know I do this. Seems to be a thing that I do. Can't find it now. Where is it? By the gods. Right, there it is. I'm very proud of myself. That's why I'm smiling like a child. So I made these Pegasus little ingots. Why won't that focus? Well, anyway, it's blurry, but you get my vibe. It doesn't focus when I put it on my ear. It's weird, this phone, this camera. Anyway, yesterday I soldered on the post. I didn't make the butterfly clip that clips on. I bought those. They're not very expensive. It's cheaper to buy them in actually. But I soldered on the post, but it's a bit long, so I might cut that end off, and you know, file the end back. But I was so proud of myself. That one was a success. However, because honesty and decency and integrity is everything, people of Earth, so I'll show you. This one was a fail, and the beautiful Pegasus even melted, even though I had it face down from the heat. So too much heat. Don't know what I'm going to do with that. Probably have to scrap it. I might try and put it back in the die and smash it back into shape. I don't know if that will work, but I'll try it, and if that doesn't work, I'll just melt it down again. But for some nutty reason that makes no sense, because the other one worked perfectly, couldn't get the back post to solder. I melted 2 posts. So I thought, well, I'll go back in tomorrow, meaning today, but I won't do it today, and I can't be bothered, it's too hot. And I'll try and remake that, and put another post on. I've got another Pegasus I can put the post on, you know. So then we'll have a matching pair of earrings, which will look quite lovely. And I've got 2 pairs there, 2 other pairs that I might try and sell, although I've had no joy with selling at the market. So I always make something for myself, and then some extra little pieces I think I'll do in case I want to try selling again. Although, you know, I really was not supported at all, and I'm upset about that, but shit happens, isn't it? Zombie apocalypses happen. That was even back like that back in when did I go to the markets? 2023 was the last time I attempted it. Wasted money and time. But, you know, one day, if I make enough things and I improve on my skills, someone might actually want to buy from me, you never know. So I just make things when the muse is with me and I feel inspired. I also soldered this down. Doesn't look very professional, very good actually. I'm a bit hypercritical of that too. But I made it to go on this bezel, so as a bezel surround. But I've got to solder that down and then cut it out, you know, cut it out of the, this was a spoon that I textured on the back, and using that as sheet, because sheet is now very, very expensive. So I'm using up the bits and pieces I do have, because waste not, want not, people of Earth. And anyway, and then I'll have to solder on a bail of some kind. We'll have to go that way. I'll have to try and make a little marking of that, because it shows on the other side. Otherwise, all these things you've got to take into account with silversmithing. It's not quite so simple as one would think. Anyway, and then hopefully I will be able to set the stone without cracking it. Where's that gone now? By all the gods. Here. So this is the stone. I just dropped it. This is the moonstone that's to go in there, and then I'll add I'm thinking about this as a bail, but I'm not sure. Anyway, all things going well, because it's not that simple, people of Earth. If I can set the stone without cracking, it should be a sweet little pendant. Really should be quite nice. And I'm thinking about hanging something off the bottom of it as well, but I'm not sure yet. I'll have to decide that after I've soldered on this braiding that I made, because when I cut it out, it'll have to be cut out to go around whatever it is I put on the bottom. Could just dangle one of these off it too, couldn't we? It's a possibility. Not upside down now. Let's be pedantic. Maybe. Maybe. Anyway, so, but I enjoyed working yesterday on my little silver things, and I made a, for a sterling silver bracelet I had, I made a I don't know what you call it, a clasp. I'll go and get it and show you so you know what I'm talking about. So I made this yesterday, the round part of the clasp. So, because I don't know what happened, but I had this piece left and the round part was missing in my box of kind of projects and scrap, and I thought, where's the thing to go with the thing? So I thought, well, that's no good, I'll have to make one. And so I'd made it a few weeks ago actually, but yesterday I decided to crank up my Smith little torch. So I soldered that onto this, and then I hammered it with texture hammers, this texture hammer. Gave it a bit of a bash with that, and it ended up slightly wonky, you know, probably from soldering and hammering, but it's okay. I don't mind. It's just for me, and I don't mind things being a bit rustic and quirky and unusual. And then this had been left over, as I said, that had been bought. I bought that. So I must have lost the other piece somewhere. I don't know how. And anyway, I soldered the jump ring. I'll show you, it's funny but it's not funny. Like, it got all bent out of shape and started to melt, but I managed to save it, and I thought, oh, I should cut that off and make another jump ring and resolder it, but it's holding together quite well. So I thought, you know what, waste not, what not, silver's expensive now. So all my jewellery looks a bit like a mad woman bedded up and screamed and lost her mind and hammered away at things. But look, it doesn't come apart. I tried to move it apart, so I thought, if it's holding together, it's holding together. And this was chain that I bought actually. I bought a meter. It was quite expensive chain, and I realised, well, I've got enough there for a bracelet. So I turned it into a bracelet. I'll put it on now. Quite proud of it. I need to put, you know, hang a little pendant or something with it. But I'm quite pleased with that. And I'm using up, you know, what was left of that chain, and making things work for me, people are there. I've still got to try and cast this, but that was an epic fail the other day. The other day as in a couple of weeks ago now. So that's another project I've still got to complete. And those other two pendants I made, the hare and the moon and the green man, I still have to solder bales on them. Didn't do that yesterday. It's weird, the muse was with me, but by the time I'd worked on that, and then the earring had the success, and then constant failing with the second one, I got frustrated and I didn't want to do it anymore, so I didn't continue with trying to solder the bales on those two big pendants. I thought that can happen another day. When things go perfectly and then they devolve, time to quit for the day. And a lot of it's got to do with my mood states, and when I get despondent and discouraged when things don't work out, it's time to quit and do it when I feel positive and capable and go with the flow. Aren't I lucky though? that I'm in a position where I can do that, because if you're in a proper job working for someone else, you kept wasting all their silver like that, you'd be bloody fired, people of Earth. I'd fire myself, actually. So I get very frustrated and upset when I fail and I waste money, you know. But anyway, it wasn't that much wastage. It was only 1 ingot's worth of wastage if I can't retrieve it, and, you know, two posts, but sterling silver wire posts. But all those little failures, you know, a few cents here, a few cents there, a few dollars here and there, do add up, people of Earth. Especially when you don't have a lot of money to start with. When I buy things in, you know, I want to get a rolling machine one day so I can roll my own wire, because it would be more economical than buying wire already prepared by someone else. But you know, you still got to pay for the silver and scrap to turn into wire, so it's cheaper, but it's still not free, you know, it's still an outlay. But life is like that, isn't it? Everything has a cost and a price. Right, price of losing everything was I don't own my own home anymore in these weird, dark and scary fucking times, which, you know, from time to time really does frighten me, and other times I'm just like, what can I do? It wasn't my fault what I was put through, what was done to me, but what can you do? Just shrug your shoulders and keep living anyway. So here we are, 27 minutes in, and I promise you I'll begin reading the story right now. Chapter 4, A Bushel of Learning. Scarcely had we settled into the strawberry pink villa before Mother decided that I was running wild, and that it was necessary for me to have some sort of education. Oh, that would ruin a kid's vibe, education and all. But where to find this on a remote Greek island? As usual, when a problem arose, the entire family flung itself with enthusiasm into the task of solving it. Each member has his or her own idea of what was best for me, and each argued with such fervour that any discussion about my future generally resulted in an uproar. Plenty of time for him to learn, said Leslie. After all, he can read, can't he? I can teach him to shoot, and if we bought a boat, I could teach him to sail. Oh, that feels good, that ice pack on the base of my neck. Right. But dear, that wouldn't really be much use to him later on, Mother pointed out, adding vaguely, unless he was going into the merchant navy or something. I think it's essential that he learns to dance, said Margot, or else he'll grow up into one of these awful, tongue-tied hobbledehoys. Yes, dear, but that sort of thing can come later. He should be getting some sort of grounding in things like mathematics and French. And his spelling's appalling. I can't abide poor spelling. I even get cross with myself when I occasionally misspell things. It's something I'm quite nuts about. The written word being written down as correctly as you can possibly manage. Doesn't matter what language you write it in, it must be, you know, correct, although it's a bit harder if you're writing in French and German, for example. And I struggled with the German grammar Oh, did I used to struggle with the German grammar. Ironically, I was much better at French at school. I don't know why that is. I think I liked the sound of it better, the way it trips off the tongue. So magnifique, so formidable. But I'm not a fluent speaker, so don't get too excited. I'm just saying how, I used to feel about French as a teenager. Would I feel the same way about the French now? Je ne sais quoi. It feels good, people. It's not very elegant, is it? Slapping an ice pack on you. But, no one cares about elegance in 34-degree heat, trust me. It all flies out the window. If I had a swimming pool, I could elegantly, alluringly descend into a pool and float around like a giant white blancmange, breathing life and light through the water itself, like a jellyfish. Alas, no. Literature, said Larry with conviction. That's what he wants. A good solid grounding in literature. I can highly recommend that to people of Earth. But I did study modern literature at university in my first year. So there is that. I'm a bit partial, as I said, to the written word and the spoken word. And I'm very opposed to censorship and silencing because of the word. Might not agree with other people's words, but I would not ever want them to be silenced. Right. Where were we? Oh yes, appalling spelling and solid good grounding in literature. The rest will follow naturally. I've been encouraging to read some good stuff. But don't you think Rabelais is a little old for him? Asked Mother doubtfully. Good clean fun, said Larry airily. It's important that he gets sex in his right perspective now. Dear goddess, who can think about sex in this heat? Who would be so mad as to think about sex in this heat? You'd be surprised, people of Earth. You've got a mania about sex, said Margot primly. Doesn't matter what we're discussing. You always have to drag it in. What he wants is a healthy outdoor life, if he learned to shoot and sail, began Leslie. Oh, stop. Oh, that's so good. Oh my goodness. Ouch. My skin cancers don't like it, but yippee-yi-yoo. Right, we'll try and leave that there for as long as we can, people. Oh, stop talking like a bishop. You'll be advocating cold baths next. It's an interesting synchronicity, isn't it? Yippee-yi-yo, here we go. You have to laugh. The trouble with you is you get in one of these damned supercilious moods where you think you know best. And you won't even listen to anyone else's point of view. With a point of view as limited as yours, you can hardly expect me to listen to it. And now, there's no sense in fighting, said Mother. Well, Larry's so bloody unreasonable. I like that, said Larry indignantly. I'm far and away the most reasonable member of the family. Yes, dear, but fighting doesn't solve the problem. What we want is someone who can teach Jerry and who'll encourage him in his interests. He appears to have only one interest, said Larry bitterly, and that's this awful urge to fill things with animal life. I don't think he ought to be encouraged in that. Life is fraught with danger as it is. I went to light a cigarette only this morning, and a damn great bumblebee flew out of the box. It was a grasshopper with me, said Leslie gloomily. Yes, I think that sort of thing ought to be stopped, said Margaret. I found the most revolting jar of wriggling things on the dressing table of all places. Right, that's starting to burn. I'll have to move that. Damn it. Ice, baby. I know what I'll do. Excuse me, but ice, baby. Ice, baby. Oh, yes, that should be pleasurable for a few moments. He doesn't mean any harm, poor little chap, said Mother pacifically. He's so interested in all these things. I wouldn't mind being attacked by bumblebees if it led anywhere, Larry pointed out. But it's just a phase. He'll grow out of it by the time he's 14. He's been in this phase from the age of 2, said Mother, and he's showing no signs of growing out of it. Well, if you insist on stuffing him full of useless information, I suppose George would have a shot at teaching him, said Larry. That's a brainwave, said Mother delightedly. Will you go over and see him? I think the sooner he starts, the better. Sitting under the open window in the twilight, with my arm round Roger's shaggy neck, I had listened with interest, not unmixed with indignation, to the family discussion on my fate. And now that it was settled, I wondered vaguely who George was and why it was so necessary for me to have lessons. But it's getting uncomfortably cold now, so it doesn't take long, does it, to cool yourself down, put your body into some kind of shock and homeostasis. I really thought I was going to have a heart attack when I walked back up from the front garden. I was breathless and weak and dizzy, and anyway I had a drink of soda water with some cordial, and that kind of revived me a bit. But it was astonishing how quickly I went down in a heap. Just ow, just ow. Just from being in the front garden. Let's try and see why is that so painful. I've got to go to the hospital and get that looked at. Right. But the dusk was thick with flower scents, and the olive groves were dark, mysterious, and fascinating. I forgot about the imminent danger of being educated and went off with Roger to hunt for glowworms in the sprawling brambles. How cute, I love glowworms. I discovered that George was an old friend of Larry's who had come to Corfu to write. There was nothing very unusual about this, for all Larry's acquaintances in those days were either authors, poets, or painters. How delightful. I must cultivate similar acquaintanceships. People who appreciate art and life and philosophy and aren't afraid to stand up and be counted against the COVIDian insanity. Where are they all? Where are they all, my people, my tribe, people of Earth? Don't know. It was George, moreover, who was really responsible for our presence in Corfu, for he had written such eulogistic letters about the place that Larry had become convinced we could live nowhere else. Now George was to pay the penalty for his rashness. He came over to the villa to discuss my education with Mother, and we were introduced. We regarded each other with suspicion. George was a very tall and extremely thin man who moved with the odd disjointed grace of a puppet. Sounds a bit like Ichabod Crane in Sleepy Hollow, doesn't it? You know, he kind of moved like that with that long, weedy, tweedy, sort of lanky look. As many Dutch people have that weird kind of gait and that long-limbed thinness. Makes them look a bit like scarecrows or puppets too. Not everybody, but many I encountered through the Dutch club with Uncle K's. Actually, he didn't have that kind of a long-limbed physique. He was sort of short and plump and rounded like me and Mum, really. I used to watch them. Susie van der Kos, my boss, was very tall with long, thin limbs and that way of walking that was almost robotic, but not quite, just disjointedness. And she actually did tell me that she was double jointed too. I remember that now. She was beautiful, don't get me wrong, she didn't look like a weirdo or anything, but she had a very unusual frame. And yes, she was indeed double jointed in her wrists. I was quite fond of her, even though she used to shriek at me. She used to shriek at everybody because her nerves were shot from, you know, the war, child sexual abuse, the stress of running a very successful business, and whatever else was shriek-worthy at the time. It sounds funny, but it's actually true. Anyway, what do I shriek about? The COVID paradigm and the mass formationed puppets that I still encounter on a daily basis, which is deeply, deeply fucking chilling and disturbing. Right, carry on with the story. His lean skull-like face, it's made him sound quite hideous, hasn't he? Didn't want to look like a skull. It's probably why I keep myself fat though. One must always have plump cheeks and attitude, people of Earth. His lean, skull-like face was partially concealed by a finely pointed brown beard and a pair of large tortoiseshell spectacles. That's starting to hurt now, so I'm trying to find another part of my body to adhere that to. Oh, ow. Oh. Right. He had a deep melancholy voice, a dry and sarcastic sense of humour. Sounds like my brother-in-law in that regard. Having made a joke, he would smile in his beard with a sort of vulpine pleasure, which was quite unaffected by anyone else's reactions. Gravely, George set about the task of teaching me. He was undeterred by the fact that there were no school books available on the island. He simply ransacked his own library. I'm going to give up on the ice pack for a while. It's no longer comforting, but irksome. He simply ransacked his own library and appeared on the appointed day armed with a most unorthodox selection of Times. My skin cancers are really not happy. They're going... Didn't like the cold. Well, they don't like the bloody heat either. What do they like? Killing me slowly. Right. Somberly and patiently, he taught me the rudiments of geography from the maps in the back of an ancient copy of Pear's Encyclopedia. English from books that ranged from Wilde to Gibbon. French from a fat and exciting book called Le Petit Larousse, and mathematics from memory. From my point of view, however, the most important thing was that we devoted some of our time to natural history, and George meticulously and carefully taught me how to observe and how to note down observations in a diary. At once my enthusiastic but haphazard interest in nature became focused, for I found that by writing things down I could learn and remember much more. The only warnings that I was ever on time for my lessons were those that were given up to natural history. Really was kind of his destiny, wasn't it? He was that passionate about that subject even as a child. What was my destiny? To fight for my fellow Homo sapiens sapiens, those who are still not awake, and those who are awake feel helpless and hopeless. How do I fight? By reading these sweet little stories and going on my little rant-ants, slapping ice on my overheated flesh and skin cancers, and keep breathing and moving forward and dreaming the impossible dream, babies. Now my knee is hurting and I don't know why. I haven't injured my knee today. Everything's just spasming in some kind of malcontented complaint. But I'm doing the affirmations. I am healthy. I am healed. I am healthy. I am healthy. I am healthy. I'm healthy. I am pretty frickin'. I tell you what I am. Stoic, intrepid, resilient, determined, courageous, a bit fierce at times, but my body doesn't always drag along with my mental state of determination, so there is that. There is that. I've been through a lot in life, and my body keeps the score, and I have to tell it, you know, knee, I know you fell down in the Green Slope shopping centre and got smashed about 20 years ago now, could be 20 years ago, something like that. I know you're not happy, but you don't need to gripe with pain right now because you're perfectly fine. The only thing we did today that was irksome for you was I had to lift up the heavy, freshly filled up orchid pot with orchid mix with the orchids and the ornaments in it, and 2 horseshoes, one in each pot, and a rock and another piece of frippery, and lift it up and hold it up against the fence and put it back on the hooks. That's the only heavy lifting you've done today, knee. You can calm your farm. It wasn't that bad. This morning I woke up writhing in agony with my wrist. It doesn't hurt during the day. It's really weird. It's only the first few hours, or first hour or so of the morning. A bit bizarre, isn't it? But my fingers are aching, but that will be from the heat too. And where can I go to, my lovely, where I can be kept in perpetual comfort and ease? You have to have the seasons. The seasons are a part of nature and a part of life. So I'll just have to move through this heat wave, the rest of Brisbane and Queensland, one day at a time, one breath at a time, and maybe put on a swimsuit and turn the hose on myself in the garden. Then I'll be out in the sun, wouldn't I? Anyway, where were we? He was not giving up on his natural history. Every morning at 9, George would come stalking through the olive trees, clad in shorts, sandals, and an enormous straw hat with a frayed brim, clutching a wedge of books under one arm, swinging a walking stick vigorously. "Good morning. The disciple awaits the master, agog with anticipation, I trust," he would greet me with a saturnine smile. In the little dining room of the villa, the shutters would be closed against the sun, and in the green twilight, George would loom over the table, methodically arranging the books. Flies, heat-drugged, would crawl slowly on the walls or fly drunkenly about the room, buzzing sleepily. Outside, the cicadas were greeting the new day with shrill enthusiasm. My little birdie boys are so quiet, but they're preening. Let me see, George would murmur, running a long forefinger down our carefully prepared timetable. Yes, mathematics. If I remember rightly, we were involved in the Herculean task of discovering how long it would take 6 men to build a wall if 3 of them took a week. I seem to recall that we have spent almost as much time on this problem, as the men spent on the wall. Ah well, let us gird our loins and do battle once again. Perhaps it's the shape of the problem that worries you, eh? Let us see if we can make it more exciting. He would droop over the exercise book pensively, pulling at his beard. And then in his large, clear writing, he would set the problem out in a fresh way. If it took 2 caterpillars a week to eat 8 leaves, how long would 4 caterpillars take to eat the same number? Now apply yourself to that. While I struggled with the apparently insoluble problem of the caterpillar's appetites, George would be otherwise occupied. He was an expert fencer and was at that time engaged in learning. I think by fencing they mean, on guard with the actual swords and those masks that they wear to protect themselves when they're fencing. I don't think they mean building fences. But maybe I should build a bridge and move over it. Anyway, he was an expert fencer and was at that time engaged in learning some of the local peasant dances, for which he had a passion. In other words, he was very good on his feet, because if you're a fencer, you need to do certain fencing poses and be very nifty with your feet, people aware, as well as your hands waving a sword around. I had a friend in school that did fencing. She loved it, actually. I was a little bit jealous because my mother never paid for me to do any interesting classes, learning interesting things like that. So I would listen to her telling me about it with great interest. So while waiting for me to finish the sum, he would drift about in the gloom of the room, practicing fencing stances or complicated dancing steps, a habit that I found disconcerting, to say the least, and to which I shall always attribute my inability to do mathematics. Place any simple sum before me, even now, and it immediately conjures up a vision of George's lanky body swaying and jerking round the dimly lit dining room. He would accompany the dancing sequences with a deep and tuneless humming, like a hive of distraught bees. Tum-tee-tum-tee-tum, tiddle-tiddle-tum-tee-dee, left leg over 3 steps right, tum-tee-tum-tee-tum-tee-dum, back down, back round, down and up. Tiddle-iddle, umpty-dee. He would drone as he paced and pirouetted like a dismal crane. Then suddenly the humming would stop. A steely look would creep into his eyes, and he would follow himself into an attitude of defense, pointing an imaginary foil at an imaginary enemy. His eyes narrowed, his spectacles a-glitter. He would drive his adversary back across the room, skillfully avoiding the furniture. When his enemy was backed into the corner, George would dodge and twist around him with the agility of a wasp, stabbing, thrusting, guarding. I could almost see the gleam of steel. And then came the final moment, the upward and outward flick that would catch his opponent's weapon and twist it harmlessly to one side. The swift withdrawal followed by the long, straight lunge that drove the point of his foil right through the adversary's heart. Through all this, I would be watching him, fascinated, the exercise book lying forgotten in front of me. Mathematics was not one of our more successful subjects. In geography we made better progress, for George was able to give a more zoological tinge to the lesson. We would draw giant maps wrinkled with mountains and then fill in the various places of interest, together with drawings of the more exciting fauna to be found there. Thus, for me, the chief products of Ceylon were tapirs and tea, of India, tigers and rice, of Australia, kangaroos and sheep, while the blue curves of currents we drew across the oceans carried whales, albatross, penguins and walrus, as well as hurricanes, trade winds, fair weather and foul. Our maps were works of art. The principal volcanoes belched such flames and sparks, one feared they would set the paper continents alight. The mountain ranges of the world were so blue and white with ice and snow that it made one chilly to look at them. Our brown, sun-drenched deserts were lumpy with camel humps and pyramids, and our tropical forests so tangled and luxuriant that it was only with difficulty that the slouching jaguars, lithe snakes, and morose gorillas managed to get through them, while on their outskirts, emaciated natives hacked wearily at the painted trees, forming little clearings apparently for the purpose of writing coffee or perhaps cereals across them in unsteady capitals. Our rivers were wide and blue as forget-me-nots, freckled with canoes and crocodiles. Our oceans were anything but empty, for where they had not frothed themselves into a fury of storms or drawn themselves up into an awe-inspiring tidal wave that hung over some remote palm-shaggy island, they were full of life. Good-natured whales allowed unseaworthy galleons, armed with a forest of harpoons, to pursue them relentlessly. Bland and innocent-looking octopi tenderly engulfed small boats in their arms. Although they wouldn't be octopi if they were engulfing boats, would they? They'd be krakens. I guess they were small boats, so maybe a large octopi after all. I got grabbed by an octopus once as a child round my ankle when I was 7, wading in the shallows. It was utterly terrifying. I still remember screaming the whole neighbourhood down, and 4 men from the neighbourhood all running to find out what it was I was screaming about, and being equally astonished when they got there to see an octopus holding on to me for dear life, trying to drag me along with it in the current, shallow current streaming. Couldn't get the thing off me, and I was terrified, utterly terrified. But think it was Mr. Hodemakers that prized its tentacle from around my ankle and told me everything was going to be alright, and it was just swimming and it didn't mean any harm really, and gave me a hug and patted me on the head and sent me on my way. Oh, it was the most terrifying moment of my life. But it was kind of revenge for all the times my father caught octopi and put them in buckets and got me to poke my finger at their little suckers so I could feel them grabbing onto my finger. And maybe I frightened and traumatized enough octopuses or octopi for that one to get its collective consciousness revenge by equally terrorizing me. Yin and yang, people of Earth. What goes round comes around. By the gods. It really does. Anyway, mustn't think about that. Chinese junks with jaundiced crews were followed by shoals of well-dentured sharks, while fur-clad Eskimos, which is actually not the correct term, they should be referred to as Inuit, people of Earth, pursued obese herds of walrus through ice fields thickly populated by polar bears and penguins. I always align with the indigenous peoples of our earth. Even though I'm a short, fat, white woman, I've experienced similar traumas, some of them afflicted by my own race of people and some afflicted by people of other races. It makes no difference. Humans' capacity for brutality to each other, what colour or creed or race you come from, but do the honour of giving people their correct ancestral and cultural language forms and terms. By the gods. There were maps that lived, maps that one could study, frown over and add to. Maps, in short, that really meant something. That water, I have filtered water, I filter my water, and even though it's been filtered, it actually has kind of a muddy taste to it. It's odd. It shouldn't be tasting muddy, it's filtered water. It worries me as to what they put in our water, people of Earth, especially during heat waves. Always wonder what they're using as an excuse for bad behaviour when we're distracted by some other, surfeit of atrophy we're struggling against. They sneak things in. I don't trust them. After the COVID paradigm, I'll never trust them ever. I didn't trust them before that, if truth be known, but that cemented my lack of trust in our governments and indeed our human species, the people that think they're leaders and have the right to inflict their ideologies on other people. Monstrous is what it is, utterly monstrous. But yes, that water should not be tasting weird. It really shouldn't. Our attempts at history were not at first conspicuously successful until George discovered that by seasoning a series of unpalatable facts with a sprig of zoology and a sprinkle of completely irrelevant detail, he could get me interested. Thus I became conversant with some historical data which, to the best of my knowledge, have never been recorded before. Breathlessly, history lesson by history lesson, I followed Hannibal's progress over the Alps. His reason for attempting such a feat and what he intended to do on the other side were details that scarcely worried me. No, my interest in what I considered to be a very badly planned expedition lay in the fact that I knew the name of each and every elephant. I also knew that Hannibal had appointed a special man not only to feed and look after the elephants, but to give them hot water bottles when the weather got cold. This interesting fact seems to have escaped most serious historians. Another thing that most history books never seem to mention is that Columbus's first words on setting foot ashore in America were, "Great heavens, look, a jaguar!" With such an introduction, how could one fail to take an interest in the continent's subsequent history? Sir George, hampered by inadequate books and a reluctant pupil, would strive to make his teaching interesting so that the lessons did not drag. Roger, of course, thought that I was simply wasting my mornings. However, he did not desert me, but lay under the table asleep while I wrestled with my work. Occasionally, if I had to fetch a book, he would wake, get up, shake himself, yawn loudly, and wag his tail. I miss my Beauregard. I do. I miss them all. Then, when he saw me returning to the table, his eyes would droop, and he would walk heavily back to his private corner and flop down with a sigh of resignation. But George did not mind Roger's being in the room, for he behaved himself well and did not distract my attention. Occasionally, if he was sleeping very heavily and heard a peasant dog barking, Roger would wake up with a start and utter a raucous roar of rage before realizing where he was. Then he would give an embarrassed look to our disapproving faces, his tail would twitch, and he would glance round the room sheepishly. For a short time, Quasimodo also joined us for lessons and behaved very well as long as he was allowed to sit in my lap. He would drowse there, cooing to himself the entire morning. It was I who banished him, in fact, for one day he upset a bottle of green ink in the exact centre of a large and a very beautiful map that we had just completed. I realised, of course, that this vandalism was not intentional, but even so, I was annoyed. Quasimodo tried for a week to get back into favour by sitting outside the door and cooing seductively through the crack. But each time I weakened, I would catch a glimpse of his tail feathers, a bright and horrible green, and harden my heart again. I think I can hear the lorikeets. Is it lorikeets I'm hearing? Anyway, they'll ask if they want food. They're very good. They generally do sit here beside my window and let me know when they want their food. They let me know in no uncertain terms too. I haven't asked for food for weeks and I actually miss it. I actually bought a new bag of lorikeet mix in anticipation of continuing feeding them, but they haven't come for it. But the turkeys and the crows and the possums are enjoying the wild seed mix that I'm giving to them now. I didn't put a fresh lot out today, but it's too hot. I haven't really seen them around. So I'm astonished that I'm hearing all the birds calling out. Everyone's hunkered down today, aren't we, boys? Are you hunkered down, my little Bo, my little Kermie? Listen, boys. It'd be nice to go in the garden, but it's just so hot. I think the next day or two we'll stay in. Okay, Mama T, you know best. I've got to, although it's quite shady where their cages are. But it's hot out there, trust me. It's like being in a sauna. It's most uncomfortable. Right. Achilles also attended one lesson, but he did not approve of being inside the house. He spent the morning wandering about the room and scratching at the skirting boards and door. Just checking how much water's left in that useless piece of nonsense I wasted money on by all the gods. Wasted my money. I have to get some more water, people. I'll be back. Don't mind me. There must be cold water on a day like today. Hello, little handsome boy. You want to be aggressive? Why are you being aggressive? What do I come to you? Step on here in your cage and say hello. Hello, little handsome boys. Alright. Grumpy bird. Grumpy angry bird. Grumpy angry birdie. I love you. I love you, grumpy angry birdie. Really, he says? Really, Mama T? Right, got that open. Does this taste like mud too? It's nice and cold, so it doesn't have a lot of taste at all. Probably when it warms up, it'll start tasting like mud. Right. I just might put the ice pack back on my back for a little bit, even though the skin cancers don't like it. They're not in charge. I am. I'm in charge of this corpus, sluggishly slogging through the sludge pile of life in this feckin' heat, people are there. It is what it is. It is what it is, isn't it? Oh, hardening hearts again. Right, we were up to Achilles, who was the little tortoise, if you remember correctly. He was scratching at the skirting boards and door. Then he kept getting wedged under bits of furniture and scrabbling frantically until we lifted the object and rescued him. Just check the temperature of my iPhone. That too is getting rather hot. Try and put some air on that. Right. Oop. Falling over. I'm still filming. Yes. Right, what happened there? Now we're all out of wonk. Right, back in the room, people. Back in the room. The room being small, it meant that in order to move one bit of furniture, we had to move practically everything else. After a third upheaval, George said that, as he was unused to such exertions, he thought Achilles would be happier in the garden. So there was only Roger left to keep me company. It was comforting, it's true, to be able to rest my feet on his woolly bulk while I grappled with the problem, but even then it was hard to concentrate, for the sun would pour through the shutters, tiger striping the table and floor, reminding me of all the things I might be doing. Indeed. I must finish off that other earring, so I'm looking forward to wearing it with my Pegasus pendant. Lovely. Going to make a matching ring too. I need it like a hole in the head, but I'm practicing with my silversmithing people of it. Practicing. I must practice. On the off chance I might manage to make a success of myself one day. One never can tell, can one, what's around the corner. I was a successful musher till someone got envious and spiteful and stymied that bastard. Where were we? Moving on, being happy. Best revenge people have. There around me were the vast empty olive groves echoing with cicadas, the moss-grown stone walls that made the vineyards into steps where the painted lizards ran, the thickets of myrtle alive with insects, and the rough headland where the flocks of garish goldfinches fluttered with excited pipings from Thistlehead to Thistlehead. I'm laughing. Why I'm laughing is I've been watching a TV show on Netflix called The Big Sea, and it's been quite triggering for me in many ways, not necessarily, distressing, but very, very many similarities and synchronicities to my life. Like the female protagonist is terminal with melanoma. I sat up and took notice of that because I do need to get these checked. And then then she looks a bit like my niece Marika, actually, or how I remember my niece Marika looking. I have haven't seen her in, you know, what year is it now? 2026. 21 years. Early January 2005 was the last time I saw that branch of my family. And anyway, so the actress looks a bit like my niece Marika, and then she's separating, about to divorce her husband, who looks very, very similar, kind of a blend between my ex-husband and my half-sister's father. Very similar looks to actually my half-sister's father, who's passed away now of old age. I think he was 97, which is a bloody good innings. But anyway, I look at these characters, these actors portraying these characters, and I'm thinking, oh, how weird that they remind me of my family members. So I continue watching the show. I was watching it most of the night last night till about 2 a.m. actually. And next thing I know, she's the main character is acting out because she's been given a terminal diagnosis, but she hasn't told her husband or her son, who's a very rebellious teenager, which was also reminding me of how my kids were, not so much as teenagers, but when they got into, you know, age 20 and 19, couldn't live together anymore. But anyway, but next thing I know, she's the husband, hoping that they'll stay together somehow or get together, puts on this lovely birthday party for her. He doesn't know she's terminal still, and she invites a, you know, like a childhood friend, and you know, she and the woman friend are going off. And next thing I look up, because I'm concentrating on something else at the same time, she's doing the mosh and she's flipping her hair, going for it, and then she goes, yay, the 80s. And I'm laughing because I didn't get to mosh in the 80s. I was too busy having babies and raising young children and being oppressed by my filthy, pedophile enabling, evil, sadistic, rotten family, and then the external family as well, because, you know, his brother-in-law was savage to me, Jacques, and they all had a right. So I lost the 80s and most of the 90s and trauma, and really didn't get to have any fun at all. And I only started dancing out in the music scene round about 2000. I'd been dancing from about 2004 onwards, but I didn't really start dancing regularly at the casino here in Brisbane, you know, city, till about 2011. And I didn't bring the mosh in till about 2015, round about that year. I just suddenly naturally started moshing and really letting it all fucking out. And that was post my suicide attempt. Probably brought something back with me from Between the Worlds, where you go into the waiting room of death when the gods don't take you but vomit you back to earth. They send you back with superpowers, and that was one of my newly acquired superpowers, was that I started doing the mosh, and I enjoy it so much. I've kept doing it even though I'm a much older woman now, and certain people didn't think it was very seemly and elegant of an older woman to do the mosh, and took attention of him, and he writhed with envy and jealousy, so he undermined me in the music scene. Savage it was. That was another thing that was another component of what happened with that lovely, what I had believed. So genuinely loved him. It was a lovely friendship, you know. Oh well, darling, shit happens, doesn't it? That's why for my 60th birthday, some weeks after, when I realised that too had been fucking sabotaged, I made the shenanigans video and did the mosh. It's an act of defiance, and to remind those entities, no one no one but no one stops me from living my life and taking joy and delight in what's left of my life. No one has the right to stop me from moshing and dancing and being joyous, because I've lived through more hellscapes than most of you, most of the average people anyway. And I will never quit, never cede, never yield to any fucking psychopath or their henchmen or their handmaidens. So on I went with my lovely video, which astonishingly has accrued 671 views. Not immediately, but in the last, when did I do it? It was after my birthday, late April. So 8 months, it's crept up to 671 views. People getting titillated by the Tanya, mushing to all the hard rock songs that I love. So there you go. I don't mind if people get a bit titillated. I'm trying to inspire you to own your own body, mind, spirit and soul, and reclaim your freedom and your innate childlike wonder and wildness, and live accordingly, with harm to none and competition with none. So it is done, people of Earth. But anyway, we'll carry on. What was I saying? Yeah, so that character doing the mosh, that I sat there and went, are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? So, maybe it's it felt almost like a parallel universe where that character and that story is living my penultimate end too. And wow. And then she's got this really dysfunctional brother who's a homeless man, which is also kind of, I had friends in the homeless, or used to have friends in the homeless community when I used to hang out with them after my nights of dancing. So that's another similarity, another piece of art imitating life. And it's just astonishing how many things in that show that I've done that, or I know someone like that, or I've experienced that emotion and gone through that. It's a little bit confronting in a way. But anyway, where was I? I've lost the thread of where we were up to. Right, we'll go back to paragraph. We'll repeat a paragraph because I'm hot and my eyes are starting to swell up on my head, which happens when I'm overheated. And that's a bit better. So I drift. Right. There around me were the vast empty olive groves, echoing with cicadas. The moss-grown stone walls that made the vineyards into steps where the painted lizards ran. The thickets of myrtle alive with insects, and the rough headland where the flocks of garish goldfinches fluttered with excited pipings. From thistlehead to thistlehead. Realising this, George wisely instituted the novel system of outdoor lessons. Just going to move this a little bit. A bit squiff. There we go. As some mornings he arrived, carrying a large furry towel, and together we would make our way down through the olive groves and along the road that was like a carpet of white velvet under its layer of dust. and then we branched off onto a goat track that ran along the top of miniature cliffs until it led us to a bay, secluded and small, with a crescent-shaped fringe of white sand running round it. A grove of stunted olives grew there, providing a pleasant shade. From the top of the little cliff, the water in the bay looked so still and transparent that it was hard to believe there was any at all. The fishes seemed to drift over the wave-wrinkled sand as though suspended in mid-air, while through 6 feet of clear water you could see rocks on which anemones lifted frail coloured arms, and hermit crabs moved, dragging their top-shaped homes. I used to love seeing anemones at the beach where I lived as a child. One of my favourite things to go and look for, actually. We would strip beneath the olives and walk out into the warm, bright water to drift, face down, over the rocks and clumps of seaweed, occasionally diving to bring up something that caught our eye, a shell more brightly coloured than the rest, or a hermit crab of massive proportions, wearing an anemone on his shell, like a bonnet with a pink flower on it. Here and there on the sandy bottom grew rib-shaped beds of black ribbon weed, and it was among these beds that the sea slugs lived. Treading water and peering down, we could see below the shining, narrow fronds of black and green weeds growing close and tangled, over which we hung like hawks suspended in air above a strange woodland. In the clearing among the weed bed lay the sea slugs, perhaps the ugliest of the sea fauna, some 6 inches long. They looked exactly like overgrown sausages made out of a thick, brown, carunculated leather. Dim, primitive beasts that just lie in one spot, rolling gently with the sea's swing, sucking in seawater at one end of their bodies and passing it out at the other. The minute vegetable and animal life in the water is filtered off somewhere inside the sausage and passed to the simple mechanism of the sea slug's stomach. No one could say that the sea slugs led interesting lives. Dully they rolled out on the sand, sucking in the sea with monotonous regularity. It was hard to believe that these obese creatures could defend themselves in any way, or that they would ever need to, but in fact they had an unusual method of showing their displeasure. Pick them up out of the water, and they would squirt a jet of seawater out of either end of their bodies, apparently without any muscular effort. It was this water pistol habit of theirs that led us to invent a game. Each armed with a sea slug, we would make our weapons squirt, noting how and where the water struck the sea. Then we moved over to that spot, and the one who discovered the greatest amount of sea fauna in his area won a point. Another weather alert has been issued. Occasionally, as in any game, a feeling would run high. Just move that out of the way. Indignant accusations of cheating would be made and denied. It was then we found our sea slugs useful for turning on our opponent. Whenever we had made use of the sea slug services, we always swam out and returned them to their forest of weed, which was a bit decent of them, I suppose, after traumatising the poor little buggers. One might grab him on the ankle one day. You never know. Next time we came down, they would still be there, probably in exactly the same position as we had left them, rolling quietly to and fro. Having exhausted the possibilities of the slugs, we would hunt for new shells for my collection or hold long discussions on the other fauna we had found. George would suddenly realise that all this, although most enjoyable, could hardly be described as education in the strictest sense of the word, so we would drift back to the shallows and lie there. The lesson then proceeded, while the shoals of little fish would gather about us and nibble gently at our legs. My kind of school. Actually, it was in primary school, I think in my second year of primary, so I was 6 years old. The year that my life turned upside down by that fucking pedophile Trevor Singh, but anyway. But I remember being taken on a school excursion, which I found quite hilarious since I lived next to the beach anyway, all the time, 365 days of the year. But my teacher, and I still remember her name, she was a very calm and kind woman. Nothing seemed to faze her. She just took everything in her stride. And she used to quietly observe me. Nothing was ever said, but I always had a feeling that she kind of knew that I was a traumatised child. She would just quietly watch over me, and she took great interest in things that I seemed to take interest in. I think she knew I was intelligent too. But I remember her, she was one of the few teachers I had in my schooling that I genuinely respected and loved, because she was kind and patient. Anyway, she took us down to an excursion to the sea, not to the beach directly opposite my house, but further along in Island Bay, where the sandy beach was. And then she walked us down to where the beginnings of the rocky beach began, where all the rock pools were. And I was so thrilled and delighted, because I felt like an expert, because I lived there and I was, in the sea, at the sea every day. But the reason why that memory has come up was I was looking at a little pink anemone. I was gently tickling its little tentacles, and she came and she observed me. She said, "Do you like that anemone, Tanya?" And I said, "Yes, it's pretty, and I love watching its little arms just flow in and out with the current and the water." The water was crystal clear, you could see right through, and it was just so beautiful and magical. She took great interest in me admiring that anemone and all the other little fishes that swam about. But anyway, I remember her just for that brief moment of real soul deep connectivity over a pink anemone. It's a bit odd when you think about it, isn't it? Little, tiny little 6-year-old Tanya already surrounded by enemies, delighting in an anemone, the freedom and the gift of the sea, to be who you are, just floating without criticism or judgment, without violations of boundaries, just playing eternally. Freedom. Well, one day when I'm de-shackled from this physical body, hopefully my spirit gets to fly free too, wherever the gods send me in the next dimension. Don't exactly have a say in it, do we? We think we do, but trust me on that, we actually don't. When I was 6 years old, I'd already had a few near deaths by that age, so I was already well aware that I had been sent back by the angels or the gods or someone upstairs that runs this show. Didn't take anything for granted, not even an anemone, people of Earth. It's how I've navigated myself through life, remaining conscious and not taking anything for granted. So the French and British fleets were slowly drawing together for what was to be the decisive sea battle of the war. When the enemy was sighted, Nelson was on the bridge, bird-watching through his telescope. He had already been warned of the Frenchman's approach by a friendly gull. Oh, a greater black-backed gull, I think it was. Well, the ships manoeuvred round each other. Of course, they couldn't move so fast in those days, for they did everything by sail. No engines. No, not even outboard engines. The British sailors were a bit worried because the French seemed so strong. But when they saw that Nelson was so little affected by the whole thing, that he was sitting on the bridge labelling his bird's egg collection, they decided there was really nothing to be scared about. The sea was like a warm, silky coverlet that moved my body gently to and fro. Matter of fact, I should be in it right now, people of Earth. But that would involve getting in a hot car, driving, to Victoria Point and getting on the little ferry and going to Cuchimudlo Island, which I should be doing. Might do that tomorrow, actually. Why am I suffering like an animal in this awful heat? Then it'll be hot there. Tomorrow's going to be the hottest day. Choices, people of Earth. Have to abide by our choices. There were no waves, only this gentle underwater movement, the pulse of the sea rocking me softly. Around my legs, the coloured fish flicked and trembled and stood on their heads while they mumbled at me with toothless gums. In the drooping clusters of olives, a cicada whispered gently to itself. And so they carried Nelson down below as quickly as possible so that none of the crew would know he had been hit. He was mortally wounded and lying below decks with the battle still raging above, he murmured his last words, "Kiss me, Hardy," and then he died. What? Oh yes, well he had already told Hardy that if anything happened to him, he could have his bird's eggs. So, though England had lost her finest seaman, the battle had been won, and it had far-reaching effects in Europe. Across the mouth of the bay, a sun-bleached boat would pass, rowed by a brown fisherman in tattered trousers, standing in the stern and twisting an oar in the water like a fish's tail. He would raise one hand in lazy salute, and across the still blue water you could hear the plaintive squeak of the oar as it twisted and the soft clop as it dug into the sea. Thus concludes chapter 4. And tomorrow, no doubt, if I'm not suffering too much from the heat, I shall be back with chapter 5, which is titled A Treasure of Spiders. Right. Oops. Starting to feel a bit faint, people of Earth. I have to organise something to eat and satiate myself, and remember to, if you're in Australia right now in the southern hemisphere, by all the gods, keep cool till after school. Fortunately the children haven't returned to school yet. I pity them in this heat, being in school, poor darlings. And those of you in the northern hemisphere are complaining about the very cold winters you're experiencing. So, you see, you each get a turn, just swapsies 6 months of the year. Alright, my darlings, stay safe, stay happy, stay wild and free, and remember, as always, to I can't hear you louder. And never ever let the bastards grind us down. A big agape, a mamati love to you all. Bye for now.